Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Very Cold Lasagna podcast, your place for all those filthy casual takes on the world of sports. I'm your host, DylanLasagna. This is episode number 190 of this icy yet spicy sports podcast. And in this episode, we're going to take a little bit of a pit stop from our 2023 NFL season recap month here on the podcast to go right back into the old icebox and travel back to the future 20 years into the past and take a look at an event where it all began again as we look back at WWE WrestleMania 20. Can't believe it's been 20 years since this event, an event that I initially didn't watch at first because, well, I wasn't a wrestling fan at the time, but the more I've become a wrestling fan, 2 years later after this event, and, the more I've become exposed to all these events from the past, the more I appreciated it. So, what better way to celebrate the 40-year anniversary of WrestleMania than go back and watch an event that actually means something than this current WrestleMania, and that was WrestleMania 20, the 20th anniversary of WWE's Super Bowl. So, yeah, we're going to take a little bit of a pit stop from our 2023 NFL season recap month. We'll resume it in the next episode of Very Cold Lasagna with part 3 of our season recaps, which I'm going to give you a disclaimer right now. It's going to be very big. It's going to be a very big episode because NFL free agency, aka the new league year for 2024, has begun. And there's been a lot of moves, and I'm not going to talk about them all because that would be like a full episode in of itself, and it would be a very long one. And you're probably going to be wondering, who are these people? And don't worry, it would be me too. So I'm going to be sitting here all day discussing all these moves. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about like all the key moves that, like, personally to me, in the next episode in part 3 of our NFL season recaps. But for now, let's talk a little bit about wrestling because yes, it is WrestleMania season. At least, the good kind of wrestling back in the past in 2004. Before we do, a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Make sure you follow Very Cold Lasagna on social media, on Instagram, and the X at Very Cold Lasagna. And for all my audio listeners out there, make sure you rate the show 1 to 5 stars, however you want to rate it. 5 stars is preferable. Not trying to be a mark or anything. But anyway, leave me a review as well. And then for my YouTube watchers out there, make sure you smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, leave a comment down below with your takes on each and every episode that I put up. And yeah, your takes especially mean the world to me as well, including the topic that we're going to be talking about here in this episode, which is our WrestleMania 20 retro review. And smash the subscribe button and share this with your friends, share this with a stranger, share this with your neighbor, share this with your family members, share this with just about anyone and everybody that you want to share this with in regards to the good or the bad takes of Very Cold Lasagna. So that being said, strap in, get into the old icebox with me, and let's go 20 years back to the future to the good times of wrestling, into the ruthless aggression era, whatever it is, the ruthless aggression era that was another pay-per-view of 2004, and that was where it all began, once again, WrestleMania 20. So taking place on March 14th, 2004, this WrestleMania in particular was, of course, celebrating the 20th anniversary of WWE's version of the Super Bowl. The grandest stage of them all was, well, of course, celebrating 20 years. And what better way to host this event than to, well, as the tagline indicates, to celebrate where it all began, again, in the world's most famous arena where it hosted the very first WrestleMania event, in Madison Square Garden in New York City, New York. Now, despite hosting this event a third time in the event's history, Madison Square Garden, unfortunately, this would be the last time that they got to host a WrestleMania because, by that point, after WrestleMania 22, WWE went full-time hosting WrestleManias inside of stadiums. Which was unfortunate because by the time we got to WrestleMania 30, it would have been nice to at least host it inside Madison Square Garden because, 30 is that magic number. And, WWE has been notable for hosting, anniversaries inside the Garden. WrestleMania 1, WrestleMania 10, WrestleMania 20, and then, get to that big magic number 30. Unfortunately, obviously, as we know now, it was inside the Silver... Oh, sorry, not the Silver Dome, brother. The Superdome, the Mercedes-Benz, or the Caesar Superdome, as they call it right now in New Orleans. So, I doubt they go back to MSG for a WrestleMania, unless they decide to do it for 50, which would kind of be cool if they did it, but I think they're too far into that point of going into these arenas to host WrestleMania. So I doubt it. So anyway, this would be the 4th or 6th WrestleMania in the New York area that they would host a WrestleMania. So the other ones were, as I said, WrestleMania 1, and then the other one was WrestleMania 2, WrestleMania 10, and then later on they would do WrestleMania 29 and 35. And this was an interesting WrestleMania because this was the earliest that it's ever been held, like at any point of the year. So March 14th on this date was actually like the earliest that it's held WrestleMania. WrestleMania is usually held in late March, early April. So it was a little interesting, when seeing this, like, wow, this is early as hell, mid-March, and then you at least have a month and a half build to the next pay-per-view. I mean, not a bad strategy, but it's like, it's a little curious also at the same time. So, yeah, 12 matches on the card, and as I was watching this pay-per-view in preparation for this episode as a Filthy Casual fan, you can at least feel interested. You can at least feel interested in some of these matches compared to 20 years later, with what they're trying to do with WrestleMania 40. A supposed another anniversary WrestleMania with, what we currently have as of right now with this card. The Bloodline main eventing both nights of WrestleMania, and then you have the 2 women's championship matches, which are supposed to, at least to some people's eyes, supposed to feel big, but unfortunately, the story is not there, at least in one of them, and the other one is just getting sped ran like we're playing GTA San Andreas on Twitch and trying to 80% that shit. And then you have, what was that? Oh, a World Heavyweight Championship match on the other side, and nothing really happening there as well. And then, of course, you have a couple other undercard matches that they're trying to do, and they're not even announced yet. Like, what the hell are we doing here with this WrestleMania 40? It's like, it's like they already lost the plot on me back at the Royal Rumble, and they completely lost the plot on me with Elimination Chamber. And I'm not gonna say why, because I already said it several times, not just on X, but I've also said it here on the podcast. Go check out my Elimination Chamber review on why, because reasons. Just reasons. So anyway, I already said why that thing should have happened, but no, they don't. Of course, Big Nose. I'm just gonna say Big Nose doesn't want to cater to actual fans that want to make the product interesting, make it more exciting. So anyway, a little side tangent before we get into this retro review. So, a little fun fact before we get into the actual card itself. You get the intro. You have the Boys Choir of Harlem opening the show, singing "America the Beautiful." It's a nice little rendition. So before we get the thing rolling, and then you get this nice cold open with Mr. McMahon, who created WrestleMania, and then you get all these moments highlighting the 20 years at the time of WrestleMania. All these key moments leading into this build for the show. All these various matches on the card, including the main events of the show. A WWE title match and a World Heavyweight Championship. The original World Heavyweight title, by the way. So, you knew what you were expecting going into the show, and you were hoping for a good show. So, let's talk about the show itself. Starting off really hot with the United States Championship match between, well, it was the Big Show, taking on an up-and-coming superstar by the name of John Cena. There wasn't really a lot of build. I'm not saying there wasn't a lot of anticipation, but there wasn't really a lot of heat towards this match because it was just basically, John Cena, who was an up-and-coming superstar with his Dr. Thugonomics rap gimmick, challenging the Big Show to a U.S. title match after No Way Out. And then they would confront each other a couple times going into it. So it was kind of a standard setup, kind of like what you see 20 years later with a lot of these wrestling matches nowadays. So it's just like, oh, hey, I want to challenge you. I want to face you at WrestleMania. But at least John Cena, he made a rap out of it for the most part. And when you look at this match between the Big Show and John Cena, going into it, man, the MSG crowd was red hot for John Cena at the time. As soon as he came out, he was like ready. They were ready for him. They were into his rap, and then they hated the Big Show. But during this match, obviously Big Show dominated him because, well, he's 7 foot tall and he's like big as hell. So of course he was gonna dominate with his size for like half the match. But towards the end of the match, Cena escaped the Cobra Clutch, and he used some like hard punches to try and rally back. And then he hit the first of 2 big sized FU. That's his finisher. Obviously what FU means. And then obviously he changed it later. But it was notable at the time, like Big Show becoming the first person to kick out of his finisher. Like, even though it was like a year old, Cena's finisher at the time, but Big Show became the first person to kick out of the FU. And then Cena was like, what do I do now? And, Cena, being the babyface in all this, he decides to cheat. Yes, that's a babyface, but I mean, it's John Cena. I mean, he has his rapper gimmick. He decides to use his padlock chain in plain sight of the referee. And he teases the crowd, like, you want me to knock him out? You want me to knock him out with this? But then, like, obviously the referee's like, hey, you can't do that or you're going to get disqualified. And then he's like, he teases that he's going to knock him out with the chain. And then he just tosses it away. And then that was actually a ruse because he uses his brass knuckles to clock the Big Show and then hit another big FU, hide the brass knuckles to win his first ever U.S. championship. Actually, his first ever not his U.S. title, his first ever championship in the WWE overall. So, a very solid WrestleMania debut for one John Cena, and what would end up being the first of many big matches for Big Match John on the grandest stage and overall in WWE. I mean, the match itself, nothing to write home about in retrospect. But as some people have already noted, where it's on here on podcasts, YouTube, social media, whatnot, various wrestlers in the industry. I mean, this is more so about how white hot the crowd was for Cena at the time, and how much he was improving in all facets. And well, this result, it was just a stepping stone into much bigger and better things, especially what was to come a year later for John Cena. So for Cena, he would go on to have 2 more successful title defenses throughout the summer. Probably more than that, because no way he'd be not defending that title. But anyway, he was stripped of the title by a certain general manager that we're going to name later, although he went on to get that title back months later at the No Mercy pay-per-view in October. Meanwhile, for the Big Show, he was storyline suspended by that same certain general manager after something he did that would get him suspended, when actually in reality they just wrote him off TV because he needed surgery on his knee. So they're just because they do something on TV doesn't mean that they legitimately did it. So just point that out there. So next up, we had the World Tag Team Championship Fatal 4-Way match, and your participants included the champions Rob Van Dam and Booker T, taking on the team of Garrison Cade and Mark Jindrak, the Dudley Boys, Bubba Ray and Devon Dudley, and La Resistance. You're probably wondering half of the names in this field, and don't worry, I don't know them either. Because basically this is your tag team showcase match, just kind of like what it was last year at WrestleMania. except with an actual title on the line. And don't worry, this isn't the only one on the card. So basically, this is just like your match to get everyone on the card, try to fill everyone in, and try to, let them get in front of everybody and show them what they got. So, not too much to talk about here in this one, because once Booker T tagged into the match, early on, he initially had control of every team that tagged themselves in, but the tables turned at some point, and then Rob Van Dam turned the field, got the hot tag, took out everyone. He got pushed off the turnbuckle by Devon Dudley, and then you got chaos all around. And eventually, Booker T got the win for his team with the scissor kick on Rob Conway, and then RVD actually got the win with the 5-star frog splash on him to retain the World Tag Team titles for his team. I mean, yeah, pretty standard match. I mean, nothing to write home about. The third match, we had Christian versus Chris Jericho in a kind of interesting match, per se, because of the storyline. This was where WWE was at the time, but I mean, it was actually, at least it was an actual storyline compared to what we're getting nowadays, because, yeah, this is how wild these storylines were, because the backstory of this match between these two former best friends, Chris Jericho and Christian, they've been a tag team at the time for I think it was the better part of a year or so, and they decided to make a bet. They made a bet to see who could sleep with a partner or a WWE diva that they chose first. Yes, that's silly. And the winner of that bet would get $1 Canadian. I'm not sure how much that actually is worth in US dollars, but maybe someone can comment on that. Whoever's up in Canada, they can comment on that in the comments on YouTube, or you could send me a message on X or Instagram. Yeah, send me your take on that. But anyway, the point is that the bet was who could sleep with their chosen partner first. Partner in air quotes. So Jericho chose Trish Stratus, Christian chose Lita, and it's kind of, I imagine this would have went off the rails, but in actuality, it kind of didn't, because Trish Stratus, who was in a relationship with Chris Jericho. I mean, not in real life, but I mean, on screen, of course. We're keeping it on TV, pal. So Trish Stratus overheard the bet. I mean, initially, yes, it was an actual relationship on screen, but then Stratus overheard the bet, and then she broke up with Chris Jericho. And then Jericho was like, shit, I felt bad. I really feel bad. And he went on to express that regret to Trish while she was in the shower, which was like, wait, what? You couldn't just tell her face to face. But anyway, that's besides the point. So rather than Christian, not feeling bad for his chosen partner Lita, because I guess she never overheard it. Jericho actually felt remorse for actually partaking in the bet. So he tried to make up for saving her from Kane on an episode of Raw, and then Stratus later agreed that they could be just friends. So not actual couple, but just friends. That kind of part in a relationship. But the problem was, this caused a rift in the friendship between Jericho and Christian, because obviously Jericho has actual feelings for Trish still, and then Christian was getting jealous because it started to interfere with their longtime friendship. So a couple of weeks go by. They have a match is made between Christian and Trish Stratus, and Christian, rather than take a easy pinfall for Trish, rather than lie down for Trish like he promised, he actually brutally attacks Trish Stratus, puts her into the walls of Jericho, Chris Jericho's finisher, makes her tap out, doesn't let go, and it brutally beats her up. So Chris Jericho even steals the highlight reel, Chris Jericho's talk show, and tells him that it was tough love. And Jericho is pissed off about this. So that makes this match official for WrestleMania. So, yeah, I mean, this match was, I don't know. I feel like this is a match that happened. It was a solid wrestling match, don't get me wrong. I feel like for the story it was trying to go for, I feel like it's kind of a little difficult for me to get invested into the early part of this match. But then once you get into the midway point where Trish Stratus comes down to rally Chris Jericho. And then Christian drags her into the ring. That's when, like, okay, it's picking up. But then for like more than half of the match, it was like, okay, it's a lot of standard stuff. I mean, it's not bad standard stuff, but it's just like, can we get to the good stuff, the really good stuff? So anyway, we get to midway through the match. Trish Stratus comes down, like I said, but Christian drags her into the ring, slams her down on the mat once she decides to get on the ring apron. And then Jericho sees this. He attacks Christian. And then Jericho tried to check on her. But then because Trish, I guess she's still having the effects of getting slammed onto the mat, she accidentally elbows him in the face. And then it allows Christian to use the deadly fruit roll-up. Yes, the fruit roll-up, you grab your opponent from behind and then you roll him up, cover him down on the mat, 1, 2, 3, to win the match. And then Trish realizes her mistake. She tries to apologize to Jericho. But then this is where things take an interesting turn. The apology turns into attempts to stop Jericho from attacking Christian, which is like, hold on a second. This is turning into, guess what? A betrayal. Trish Stratus hits Jericho. She slaps him. And then Christian hits the kill switch, his finisher, on Y2J. And then it turns out that Christian and Trish were in cahoots all along. They were in a relationship all along. And they proved just that. Christian and Trish share a smooch. Not just any smooch. Tongue for tongue. And out of spite to their former friend. It was like, man. Poor Jericho, man. He always got the bad stuff. But anyway, as for the match was not bad. But it was just, like I said, a little hard to get into for a match with such kind of personal stakes. Maybe a stipulation could have been involved as well. But anyway, everything that happened afterwards, I mean, it was okay. This post-match ending led to a handicap match at Backlash. Jericho beat Trish and Christian. And then it also led to another match on Raw inside of a steel cage. Jericho also won that, but then Christian suffered a bad back injury and would miss 4 months of action. And you would think that the feud would end there when Christian got injured. But then, Christian had a bodyguard. Started to have a bodyguard, Tyson Tomko. Yeah, I know some of you are not familiar with them. But then, yeah, those next couple months, Jericho started the feud with Christian's bodyguard. And when Christian came back, he resumed his feud with Jericho. I was like, kind of stretching it a little bit. But anyway, Jericho ended up winning the feud overall, even though he ended up winning most of the matches against Christian. So it was a little weird there. So our fourth matchup on the card, we had Evolution, Ric Flair, Randy Orton, and Batista taking on the Rock and Sock Connection, Mick Foley, and The Rock. The Rock and Sock Connection, back in the Attitude Era, reformed once again to take on the young upstart group, well, except for Ric Flair, obviously, taking on Evolution. And this is a rivalry that dates back in June of 2003, when Evolution was, I guess, say a little bit in its infancy, a little couple months past its infancy. But then Randy Orton and Ric Flair attacked Mick Foley following a ceremony that was honoring his career. And then Randy Orton, he kicked him down a flight of stairs. So that kickstarted the rivalry. And then 5 months later in December, Foley returned as Steve Austin's replacement as the co-general manager of Raw. And then he decided to give himself a Intercontinental Championship match against Randy Orton, who of course was the Intercontinental Champion. But for whatever reason, he walked out of it even after Orton spat in his face. So he's kind of like a wuss or something. So a month later, you had Foley return in the Royal Rumble match, and he went straight after Randy Orton, and nobody but Randy Orton, and he eliminated both Orton and himself from the match in a flurry of rage. So this rivalry kept going on for weeks and weeks, and after getting jumped by Orton and Flair, who were, again, now joined by Batista a few weeks later, Foley reunited with The Rock, fresh out of Hollywood, to reform the Rock and Stock connection and challenged Evolution to a handicap match at WrestleMania. So I liked what they did here during the show. Prior to this match, like during the show itself, both teams were recapping the events in some pretty unique ways that I think WWE should be doing again. I think they are, but this is pretty cool. So Orton was doing something like in the same kind of like in the same stairway that they kicked Mick Foley down the flight of stairs. So he was pretty much recapping all the events leading up to WrestleMania, and while also proclaiming that Mania would be Evolution's night. Meanwhile, you had Mick Foley and The Rock backstage giving the viewers at home, of course, backstage looks, and then they decided to take the interview into the crowd, which was pretty cool. Like, I know WWE's doing that like more nowadays, trying to give it a sportsy feel. I mean, obviously, like you can't really be sportsy, but I mean, you're trying to at least trying to incorporate some elements, like as I described with this Evolution stuff. So anyway, this match, it was fun. The Rock and Foley, they had the early advantage, and despite years away from teaming with each other, they worked pretty well until Evolution took control, slowed the pace down. Evolution took turns beating up on The Rock and Mick Foley until you had The Rock taking the hot tag. And then a moment in the match, Batista was looking poised to finish off The Rock after a spine buster. But then you had this funny moment where Flair stopped him from trying to do the Batista bomb because he wanted to do his best impersonation of the People's Elbow. He even did his little strut as he was trying to finish it. But then The Rock got up and decided to show the Nature Boy how it's really done. He hit his People's Elbow for a near fall. And then Randy Orton went out to receive the Rock bottom afterwards. But Ric Flair pulled the Rock out of the ring to stop the 3 count and proceeded to distract the referee so Batista could hit the Batista bomb on Rocky behind the back for a near fall by Orton. And Foley got the hot tag, took out Randy Orton with the underhook DDT, but quite couldn't finish him off though with Mr. Sacco because out of nowhere, Orton struck with the RKO 1, 2, 3 for the upset win for Evolution. This was fun. You had a really fun start with some good spots from both teams and a good finish that saw the future stars in Orton Batista get put over in their positions in a big match against two of the biggest names in wrestling in Mick Foley and The Rock. Now, in the end, I was kind of wondering why Mick Foley no-sold the RKO like he lost on a fruit roll-up because, like when Randy Orton was taking Mr. Sacco and then Orton out of nowhere hit him with the RKO and then, he took a 1, 2, 3. Foley, instantly got up. Like, bro, what are you doing? Sell that shit. So anyway, regardless, everyone looked good, including The Rock. He didn't look ring rusty. I mean, it had only been a year since he competed in his last match. I mean, still, a year's a year. So he made him look. This made for a good handicap match. And then afterwards, you had MSG and The Rock giving Mick Foley a standing ovation. Everyone was cheering, but it's far from over between Mick Foley and Randy Orton. So they had one more grudge match in the near future, but who knows? Maybe it's another story for another day. Meanwhile, because his acting career was in full swing at the time, unfortunately, for fans of The Rock, he only appeared in the WWE sporadically for the next 7 years. So this was actually his last full-on match for the last 7 years until, obviously, Survivor Series of 2011. And then, obviously, this was kind of his last full-on appearance in the WWE before WrestleMania 27 in 2011. So this was a fun handicap match. I liked it. Kind of like the jump starter to this WrestleMania, aside from the opening match with Cena and The Big Show. So next we had a brief segment from the Hall of Fame class of 2004, which was actually the first revived class since quite some time. I think a little bit over 5 or 10 years or something, which included the likes of Sergeant Slaughter, Superstar Billy Graham, Big John Studd, Harley Race, Jesse the Body Ventura, Junkyard Dog, and Bobby the Brain Heenan. You also had Pete Rose, who was the first ever celebrity wing inductee as well. So this is actually a very good a Hall of Fame class too, if for a revival, and they kept it going to this day. So next up, another filler match, and this is where people might get a little pissy. We had the first women's match of the night, and it was a Playboy evening gown match between Tori Wilson and Sable taking on Miss Jackie and Stacy Keibler. This was the first of 3 SmackDown versus Raw matches at this event, and like I said, people would have gone in this match. So anyway, you had SmackDown's Tori Wilson and Sable being named as the next female divas for Playboy magazine by the creator Hugh Hefner, who obviously created Playboy magazine. But Raw's Miss Jackie protested the decision and decided to recruit Stacy Keibler to go up against them in this evening gown match. Now, before the match started, all but Miss Jackie decided to strip down to their, well, you know what? And it took Tori and Sable to strip Miss Jackie down. And as expected, there were plenty of interesting positions from all 4 ladies. And even the referee would get involved in the you know what. And then Tori Wilson would use the delicious fruit roll-up, not the deadly, the delicious fruit roll-up on Miss Jackie to win the match. So, I mean, I think if we could teleport those ladies from 2004 to here, I'd say the same thing Michael Cole and Taz were saying. Get over here to where I'm sitting. But otherwise, I mean, yeah, this match was, it was just filler. But I mean, maybe for some people, it was sports entertaining. Anyway, going on to the next match, we had the Cruiserweight Championship Open. And your participants included the champion, Chavo Guerrero, defending his title against Akio, Billy Kidman, Funaki, Jamie Noble, Nunzio, Rey Mysterio, the former champion, Shannon Moore, Tajiri, and Ultimo Dragon. So, kind of like with the World Tag Team title match, this is another showcase match, this time with cruiserweights. And this was kind of a clusterfuck kind of match. But the rules of this open were as follow. 2 wrestlers started in the ring, with wrestlers appearing at random intervals, except for the Cruiserweight Champion, who is designated as the final entrant. Wrestlers are eliminated by the traditional rules: pinfall, submission, countout, disqualification, and the last person standing is deemed as the Cruiserweight Champion. Now, I would have thought that this would have been like a gauntlet match of sorts, considering these rules, but no, this is actually a very confusing concept, because I was thinking, like, why is everyone coming out? It's like, I thought this was like a gauntlet match. But instead, everyone was coming out, and you had, like, Ultimo Dragon and Shannon Moore starting in the ring, and then everyone else was outside the ring, just standing around, when you could have clearly caused interference. So, it was kind of a strange concept. And eliminations were kind of coming fast. Shannon Moore quickly eliminated by Ultimo Dragon. Jamie Noble was the next man up and eliminated both Ultimo and Funaki in pretty short order. And then Nunzio got eliminated by countout. Billy Kidman entered after Nunzio was eliminated, and as Nunzio was trying to was getting payback on Jamie Noble for his elimination, yet Kidman botched a springboard shooting star press to the outside because, damn, it looked like he hit his head by not having that full rotation when you're trying to get that flip in. That looked scary. That looked really scary. Anyway, Kidman eliminated Noble with his top rope finisher, the BK Bomb, before Rey Mysterio, the fan favorite, next entered the match and eliminated Kidman with the top rope sunset flip power bomb. If I try to say that a million times, I'm going to stutter my ass like I don't already do. So next you had Tajiri. This match kind of goes a little longer because Tajiri's in there with Ray. He tries to use the poison mist on Mysterio, but Ray dodged it, and Tajiri hit the mist on his partner Akio instead. So Ray uses the fruit roll-up to eliminate Tajiri. And Ray, was on the verge of reclaiming his cruiserweight title that he lost at No Way Out. But despite hitting a top rope Sudacita on Chavo Sr., the elder Chavo recovered enough to help his son retain by holding his son's hand on a reverse sunset flip pin from Ray. So that's how Chavo retained the cruiserweight title. So, like I said, this match concept was confusing. But I mean, not to say that was bad, but I really thought it was like a gauntlet match kind of thing. So it was an interesting decision to have Chavo Guerrero beat Ray again for like the second straight pay-per-view using the same dirty tactics. Like, oh, I'm gonna have my dad help me win this match again, because it made Rey Mysterio look really stupid. Because after this, Ray would be put in an on and off tag team with Rob Van Dam, who got drafted to SmackDown, while also eventually getting back the cruiserweight title 3 months later. Like, okay, what's the point of losing it? So anyway, it ended up being a decent showcase for the cruiserweights, but the finish, in my opinion, was pretty questionable. So now the second half of the show gets really interesting. Now we got through the first half of kind of filler stuff. Now here comes the second half. The second half gets pretty interesting, in my opinion. And it starts with this match. Bill Goldberg taking on Brock Lesnar in what is considered a dream match. And it has Stone Cold Steve Austin as a special guest referee. I know what you're going to say. There's a lot of opinions on this match. It's so divisive even 20 years later. But let's talk about this actual match itself first. So this feud was ignited back at 2003 at the Survivor Series event. Goldberg, Brock Lesnar, who were champions at the time. Lesnar, the WWE champion. Goldberg, the World Heavyweight champion. That's where they first met. They confronted each other. Lesnar was talking shit at Goldberg, and that planted the seeds for the rivalry that was to come. Perhaps at WrestleMania 20. Oh, that's what at least some people thought at the time. But then you had their feud intensify at the Royal Rumble, where it was a cross-branded event, and Lesnar again confronted Goldberg, who was entering the Royal Rumble at number 30. But then you have Lesnar eliminate Goldberg from the Royal Rumble. Well, not technically, but interfering, hitting an F5 on Big Bill, and that led to his elimination. So you have Goldberg demanding a match with Lesnar, and while he wouldn't get initially, he would do things to make Lesnar get his wish. So the first major blow, the first and kind of critical blow to that would be Goldberg returning the favor at SmackDown's No Way Out pay-per-view by not only hitting Lesnar with I think it was a spear, a jackhammer. I don't know. It's been a while since I did that No Way Out review. But anyway, Lesnar got hit with a jackhammer in a confrontation before his title match. But then Goldberg escaped from jail and showed up in that said title match against Lesnar and Eddie Guerrero. And effectively cost Lesnar the title by spearing him and allowing Eddie Guerrero to win the title with that frog splash. So that led to Lesnar begging and pleading and emotionally crying. Well, he didn't really cry. He wanted Bill Goldberg at WrestleMania, and Vince McMahon gave them their wish. It set up this long-awaited dream match between Brock Lesnar and Bill Goldberg at WrestleMania 20, and Stone Cold Steve Austin was going to serve as a special guest referee. Now, things took a very odd turn with this build-up because, Austin was going to be was trying to show his test of will as a special guest referee. He had a match. He was refereeing a match between Mr. McMahon and Eric Bischoff on an episode of Raw, and then it went to a no contest because Lesnar attacked Austin during that match. And he also stole his signature four-wheeler ATV as payback for what he did at No Way Out. So that was, the emphasis of this build. That was red flag number one. The emphasis of this build being Lesnar stealing Austin's ATV. That's the main emphasis of this build. A fight over an ATV. And Austin eventually gained that ATV back before Mania. Like, should the focus be on Goldberg and Lesnar? But wait, there's a reason why. There's actually two reasons why the focus was not on Goldberg and Lesnar. Because during this time period, for those of you that don't know, or are not in verse of wrestling all that much, they don't pay attention to the backstage stuff. Even 20 years ago or 20 years now, during that time period, whether you're a casual wrestling fan or a hardcore wrestling fan, or like hell, not a wrestling fan at all, it became very well known. It became very well known that both Goldberg and Brock Lesnar, they were on their way out of the WWE. They were like, no, we're done. We're out. We're finito. I believe Goldberg's reasoning was that he let his contract expire, or I think he just wanted to leave. Meanwhile, you had Lesnar. He wanted to go play for the NFL, and he was pretty much worn out from the full-time schedule of the WWE. And, all I can say is that history was going to speak for itself when it came to this match. So let's talk about this match that went about 15 minutes, and absolutely nothing happened for half of it. Yeah, in front of a very hostile MSG crowd, well aware of what was going on. Nothing happened. Nothing happened for the first 15 minutes as Goldberg and Lesnar were just looking at each other. Lesnar was just like, whew. He's just like taunting Goldberg. They were just pacing around the ring as people were chanting, "You sold out," singing na 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 na, hey hey hey, goodbye Brock. So they were just chanting a lot of negative stuff at them because, I mean, rightfully so, because you kind of feel betrayed that they were leaving like literally at the last moment. So they were just pacing around the ring, and you even have Steve Austin trying to get them to do something because they weren't doing anything for like 5 minutes. So after like 5 minutes of not doing anything, they would finally lock up and they would run into each other. But then that would take another 5 minutes of doing nothing. And then things finally picked up at the 10-minute mark when Goldberg lifted Lesnar up for his modified military press slam. And then they brawled outside the ring for like a minute or two. And then later on, both Goldberg and Lesnar traded finishers for near falls. And also getting pissed at Austin that it wasn't a 3 count. Like, why didn't I win this match? So Lesnar tried to steal Goldberg's spear, but then he missed. And then Big Bill made him pay for it. He hit the spear, and then he hit the jackhammer to win the match. And, well, the post-match festivities, if you even want to call it that, saw Lesnar flip off both the fans, which actually, the initial middle fingers were actually directed at the hard cam, which, if the hard cam is actually pointed towards, I guess the main guy at the top, which in that case at the time was Mr. McMahon, because Lesnar at the time was pissed at Vince during this point. He had a kind of a bad relationship with Vince during this time. So he flipped off Vince, I guess at the fans as well, and he flipped off Austin. So that led to Austin giving him the stunner. He also gave a stunner to Goldberg. So that was essentially their parting gift. Stone Cold stunners and a bunch of beer on the way out. That made the crowd happy, but also at the same time, not a happy ending for either of them. So what did we learn here? What did we learn from this first encounter? Yes, I said first encounter of Bill Goldberg versus Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 20. So in instance, this was a dream matchup at the time. Two heavyweights, two well-known heavyweights that looked like stars, that were stars at the time. that ended up being very memorable for all the wrong reasons. It still is memorable for all the wrong reasons. So, because like I said, whether you're a casual fan or a hardcore fan, somewhere in the middle, or maybe you didn't even watch wrestling at all, living in 2004, you had to feel betrayed at the fact that, these were two guys that were kind of in their prime of wrestling, and they decided to just, out of nowhere, leave. And this didn't become public knowledge until like days before WrestleMania. They were just going to leave out of nowhere, and then on the way out, they put on a stubborn performance like this one. Like, doing absolutely nothing for like several minutes. And yeah, some people say, oh, it's just a hardcore wrestling crowd. They're like what the cool kids call a smarky crowd. But in this case, they kind of had a feeling of being betrayed, because you could tell in their faces, the faces of both men as well as Austin's, that they just wanted to get it over with. They just want to get their paycheck and then move on with their lives and out of WWE at the time. Because for the minutes that they got, they basically served nothing. They just wanted to go home. And like I said, it didn't help with the fact that for the majority of this build, it was just fighting over an ATV between Austin and Lesnar. And then Vince even got involved at some point too. So, yeah, this match was terrible. This whole build-up and match itself was terrible. So after this, both men left the WWE. They pursued different avenues. But in due time, they eventually came back. Lesnar came back in 2012. And fortunately, as time went on, time healed all wounds. We eventually got a much better match. Actually, better matches out of the two. And we got those two matches at Survivor Series and at WrestleMania 33. So we at least got something good later on down the line. And we were at least able to revisit it later on. So we got kind of like a trilogy of sorts. And I say the best match out of the three was that WrestleMania 33 match for the Universal title. It was unfortunate, the result. It had lasting effects on the WWE during that period. But at least in a sense, I'm happy. Like I said, they at least made up for that disaster. Well, at that point, a little bit more than 10 years prior. But 20 years ago, oh man, that was terrible. That was really terrible. So now let's talk about this WWE Tag Team title Fatal 4-Way match between the champions, Rikishi and Scotty 2 Hotty, taking on the teams of Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas, a.k.a. the world's greatest tag team, the Basham Bros, and the APA, the Acolytes. Just like with the Raw Tag Team title match, this is just basically another Tag Team Championship Showcase match, just on the SmackDown side. This one was very basic. It's just the heel teams taking turns, ganging up on Scotty 2 Hotty until he managed to tag in his partner Rikishi, and he went on a tear. Getting the crowd back into the match after what was a stinker with Lesnar and Goldberg. And speaking of stink, he put the stink face on Charlie Haas. Bradshaw decided to get into the proceedings, going a little tear of his own, taking out Rikishi, taking out the Bashams with the clothesline from hell. Rikishi took him out though with a Samoan drop, and then he decided to sit. He decided to sit his big butt on Doug Basham to get the win and retain the tag team titles for him and Scotty. And they decided to do a little dance for the Garden. Scotty did his signature worm. Rikishi did a signature dance with Scotty, and they even got pyro, which is kind of cool for an otherwise lackluster match. So nothing much else to comment there. Afterwards, we had a brief video package signaling the return of one Adam Edge Copeland. Edge during this time, he was actually sidelined with a serious neck injury that eventually would, unfortunately, cause some serious ramifications for his career. But yeah, it kind of sucked what happened, at least during that point. But nonetheless, Edge was returning. Coming soon to a Raw or SmackDown near you during that time in 2004. So next up, we had a brief Jesse the Body Ventura segment. So Jesse was back out there after the Hall of Fame segment. And then this was kind of a really pointless segment. because he came out to do a interview that like he did back in the Golden Era days, and this time he decided to interview the star of the show The Apprentice and the host of WrestleMania 4 and 5, as well as the future president of the United States in 2016, Donald Trump. So he decided to ask him a bunch of questions like, like his show about The Apprentice. And then he wanted to ask a really stupid question. Like, he wanted to like vouch for Trump's political support. Like, wait, what? Like, why are we doing this here? Anyway, so this segment, like, it told me that this is just basically an ad campaign. I don't know, did Jesse Ventura run for president in 2008? But either way, this segment, that's what it told me. Because obviously he didn't win it because, Barack Obama won that. But still, why are you doing that here? Like, get this politics crap out of the show, please. No, don't do that. Not even in 2004. Like, no. Like, don't do that. So anyway, we had our next matchup between the WWE Women's Champion Victoria taking on Molly Holly in a interesting stipulation, hair versus title. So this rivalry between these two women had been brewing since Victoria became Holly's challenger for the women's title at the end of 2003. So Victoria was initially a heel, but then she became a good girl by attacking Holly during a tag team match on the first episode of Raw in 2004. And Victoria would go on to beat Holly in various matches, including the Royal Rumble pre-show on Sunday Night Heat that I talked about briefly in that Royal Rumble retro review, as well as various tag team matches. And that eventually led to Victoria winning the title off of Holly in a 4-way elimination match on the February 23rd episode of Raw. So 1 week later, Molly Holly finally had enough of losing to Victoria, so she decided to challenge her to a rematch at WrestleMania. But Stone Cold overheard Holly saying something about how she would do anything and everything to get her title back. And that's when Stone Cold decided to up the stakes, leading to this stipulation of title versus hair. So this match was kind of filler as well. It just didn't really click for me, and probably not for the fans in the attendance during that time period as well. It was just kind of slow, and Molly was kind of botchy for much of it, including that sunset flip powerbomb towards the end of it. And yeah, you kind of could tell where the lack of interest was when you have Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler on commentary, talking about other things, which pretty much where it goes to show where women's wrestling was at the time. And you really think that it's respected? No, I'm just kidding. But no, seriously. I mean, the more I watch Victoria's matches / Tara's matches, the more I kind of grown to appreciate Tara, not just as a women's wrestler, but yeah. So anyway, this is another match, that really started to take the wind out of the crowd and out of me, because like I said, this really started to become filler. Because after the Lesnar and Goldberg match checked people out, it's starting to really become dangerous territory of losing people. Like, this show was really starting to lose people in terms of interest. Like, the rest of these matches better get people back into it, because this is starting to feel like a mixed to a disappointing bag for this WrestleMania card. So Victoria won a kind of quick match by reversing the Widow's Peak from Molly into a backslide roll up to retain her women's title, which meant haircut time, bitch. Molly Holly had to get a WrestleMania haircut. And after some initial fighting, Victoria tied Molly up into the barber chair, and that meant shaving time. Molly Holly had to get a haircut. And interesting enough, I read some stories before this that Molly Holly actually pitched the idea of getting her head shaved at WrestleMania. So, hey, kudos to her, man. I got to respect that. And also, funny enough, Molly's haircut still kept going into the next match, which was the WWE Champion Eddie Guerrero, Latino Heat, taking on the Wrestling Machine, Kurt Angle. So Kurt Angle was assigned the special guest referee for Eddie's first title defense on the SmackDown after No Way Out. Kurt Angle won the number one contendership in that triple threat match at No Way Out. Eddie won the WWE title over Lesnar in the main event, the match after that. But in this particular match that Kurt Angle was the special guest referee for, Kurt Angle decided to bloody and brutally beat up Eddie as he was going to win that match. Why did he do it? Well, he didn't like what the WWE champion was representing. Eddie, they decided to play on, Eddie's past issues again. Eddie's history with drugs, alcohol. So basically, you're using the drug addict card. So basically, Kurt Angle didn't like the fact that Eddie was WWE champion because, well, he didn't want a drug addict like Eddie representing both the WWE and America as a champion. So he wanted to change that at WrestleMania by winning back the WWE championship. So throughout this lead up to Mania, Kurt Angle would continue to spread his message like he was on a political campaign and try to get and successfully get the advantage over Eddie in this match. So this match it kind of started slow at first, but then the more it went on, the more I kind of started to enjoy it. So why it started off slow? Well, it was mostly chain wrestling. I mean, not that it's bad, but sometimes if it goes on for a little bit too long, then it starts to lose my interest. So they're pretty much deadlocked into several minutes of chain wrestling, but something that was also noticeable that the crowd was very split between the two. Some people were chanting, let's go Angle, Angle sucks. Let's go Angle, Angle sucks. Early on in the match. There's also this nice sequence where both of them were counting each other's suplex signature moves. Eddie trying to do the Three Amigos, but Kurt Angle countered. Kurt Angle trying to do his signature German suplex, but then Eddie countered that as well. But then things picked up a little and Eddie missed a high-flying move on Angle, and then he landed ribs first on the barricade. And then Angle spent a couple minutes targeting the hurt ribs. And then things really started to pick up here. Kurt Angle tried to hit a German superplex on Eddie, but then Eddie pushed him off, tried to hit a frog splash, but Kurt dodged it. And then that's when Eddie hit the Three Amigos suplexes on Angle, but then Angle countered the third one into an ankle lock. Eddie managed to get out of that, and then Angle stopped a frog splash to toss Eddie from the top rope for a near fall. He literally just yeeted him from the top rope, flipping him off of it, and that was like, okay, that's it. Business is time for business. I'm gonna take my straps off. I'm not gonna get what. I'm gonna put him down onto my waist and then kick your ass. I'm gonna break your ankle. But moments later, that's not what he did. Eddie countered the Angle Slam. That's Kurt Angle's finishers. And he countered it into a nice DDT. That's when he hit his signature frog splash. Finally got it in, but unfortunately, he only got a near fall. He only got a 2 count, and that's when the crowd really got back alive. They were like, "Wow, how did Kurt Angle kick out of that?" It's like, oh, shit. So Angle suddenly locked back when Eddie actually tried to pick him back up. Kurt Angle suddenly found the killer instinct again. Locked back in the ankle lock seconds later, but Eddie managed to escape it. He threw Kurt Angle out of the ring with his leg. He threw his weight out. But then this is when we saw the finish. Eddie was untying his boot, trying to get that blood back flowing in his bum ankle, in air quotes. And then Kurt Angle noticed this. Kurt Angle noticed that Eddie is tending to his bum ankle. And he said, you know what? I'm going to go for the kill. I'm going to make this bitch tap out in the middle of the ring, humiliate in front of everybody with the ankle lock. He relocked in the ankle lock, but what he didn't notice was the untied boot. And in old Latino heat fashion, Eddie Guerrero pushed him off, and then when Angle noticed the untied boot, he tried to go after him, but then Eddie rolled him up into the deadly fruit roll-up, and with a foot full of rope, retained the WWE title in traditional Latino heat fashion. So, yeah, what a pretty good WrestleMania title match. Again, it started off a little slow. with the mat-based wrestling. But then when you get to the halfway point, it really started to pick up. Like, these were kind of coming fast and furious. There were some hard-hitting moves, and a few near falls that were actually worth near falls. Now, I'm not sure of the finish, though. In terms of, if some found the finish to be pretty cheap with, Eddie cheating, but, that's part of Eddie's character, living by lying, cheating, and stealing. That's his whole character. So it was kind of symbolic on wrestling's biggest stage, outsmarting Kurt Angle to keep his WWE title, the world title that he just won. So I thought it was a pretty good finish to a pretty good match. Yeah, nothing else more to say about it. So afterwards, Kurt Angle actually wouldn't get another crack at the WWE title for quite some time because he had to get surgery on his neck. Again, his neck issues at the time were pretty prevalent. So he had to go get surgery on his neck, and he had to find a way to write him off TV. So they did this storyline going back to the Big Show earlier in the episode. So Big Show severely injured Kurt Angle by chokeslamming him off a balcony. Or was it a balcony or like a ledge? Oh, it was a ledge, like a high ledge. And then there's this like when you watch it and then you have Kurt Angle come back like a few weeks later, it looks super unrealistic. Like Big Show chokeslams Kurt Angle onto concrete, and then Kurt Angle's head's bleeding, his leg is like broken, and then he comes back a couple weeks later and he's in a wheelchair. So he comes back, returns to replace Paul Heyman as the general manager of SmackDown, but now he's in a wheelchair, and he was still feud with Eddie while he's the general manager. And he would actually become a key factor in Eddie losing the WWE title to the repackaged John Bradshaw Layfield at the Great American Bash 3 months later. So once Angle was fired as general manager a month later, they would reignite their feud, which culminated at Survivor Series later that year, and that was that. So the second and final match of this WrestleMania was The Undertaker, the Dead Man, the Phenom, taking on the Big Red Machine, Kane. Now, why do I say the Phenom, the Dead Man, other than, at the time, the American Badass? Well, at the 2003 Survivor Series, The Undertaker was on the verge of winning the main event Buried Alive match against Mr. McMahon. But his on-screen brother Kane cost him that match and, quote-unquote, buried him alive. Kane explained why, because, well, as I said, they were brothers. Those two brothers used to be a monstrous force, as Kane quoted it, until when Undertaker returned from injury in 2000 at Judgment Day, he returned as what Kane described as one of you, aka just one of the people, in what ended up being as his biker gimmick, known as the American Badass, Big Evil, whatever you want to call it. Whatever nickname you wanted to call The Undertaker's biker gimmick. Kane claimed this as, the brother that he didn't know anymore. He claimed it as a fraud, even though when Kane and Undertaker were together in 2000, 2001, he didn't have a problem with that. It's like, okay, kind of hypocritical. So, anyway, he decided to cost Undertaker's match so his brother would rest in peace forever. But that all changed at the 2004 Royal Rumble, when at number 20, at the 20 spot, Undertaker's signature gong. It played, it freaked out Kane, and that led to his elimination. So that began weeks of mind games from the rechristened Dead Man en route to the return of the Phenom against his brother at WrestleMania 20. So this match was pretty solid, although not as good as their first encounter back at WrestleMania 14. And this match was much shorter than the one that they had a couple years earlier. But this is more notable because obviously it was the return of the Undertaker's undead dead man gimmick, the old Phenom gimmick that he had before he became the American Badass. So leading the return of the dead man was his old manager, Paul Bearer, the one that controlled the urn, the one that controlled the power of The Undertaker in his early days of his career. So Paul Bearer came out with a bunch of droids who were carrying torches, and the MSC crowd was waiting in anticipation. This was where they really got back on their feet, waiting for the return of what they thought was the true. Some people thought this was the true Undertaker, not the American Badass, but that's up for debate. But anyway, once Undertaker came out in full undead form, the dead man, people rose up to their feet, and Kane was shook. He was acting like he saw a ghost. He was like, "No, you're not real. You're not real. I killed you." And then he decides like, no, you can't be alive. And then Undertaker made him pay for it. He went on an offensive flurry, and now Kane got some offense in. He even chokeslammed his brother. But then this match was mostly a showcase of Undertaker's old signature offense that people were very familiar with, like old school, flying and diving onto Kane. And then when going back to that chokeslam, Kane, he got too cocky. Rather than go for the immediate pin, he was like, "Ha ha ha! I got him, Paulie, I got him." And then to his horror, though, Undertaker sat up. So he went back on the offensive, and then Undertaker finished off his brother with a chokeslam, and then one tombstone pile driver later. The dead man marked his return 1, 2, 3 at WrestleMania by adding his brother back onto the list of his victims for, at the time, his undefeated streak. It now became 12-0. So, yeah, the dead man was back at this time, and he was better than ever, and he was deadlier than ever. So, after this match, they both went their separate ways. Kane was back on Raw, doing very crazy things. Like beginning a love story with Lita. He began a love story. He tried to, get in her. Just kidding. But he got turned away by Lita, and then he decided to, I'm going to take issue with this. He decided to take matters in his own hands by kidnapping her, and then forcing her to marry him, which led to this whole ordeal with Shawn Michaels and then Matt Hardy, and then his whole wild storyline with Snitsky with the baby. It was a wild storyline with Kane and Lita. Like, no joke. Meanwhile, for The Undertaker, he returned to SmackDown, and then he went on a bunch of different side quests to slowly ease him back into the main event picture, including a SummerSlam feud with the WWE Champion JBL. But in between all that, he eventually dumped his manager, Paul Bearer, because he was back in control of his old self, in no need of the urn, no need of Paul Bearer. So he was essentially rendered useless. But overall, The Undertaker was back in his old form in 2004, and ready to begin the next phase of his legendary career. Now we had our main event. After kind of a long slog of a show, we had 11 matches on the show, and I'm gonna be honest, a lot of it was filler. A lot of filler. But here we were in the main event. A lot of fast-paced matches, but ready to sit through this last important one. And that was the main event. The World Heavyweight Champion, Triple H, taking on Shawn Michaels, his most hated rival, and redacted. No, I'm kidding. Chris Benoit. This all came about at the 2004 Royal Rumble. The World Heavyweight Champion, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels fighting to a not a time limit draw, but a draw in a last man standing match for the World Heavyweight Championship in a bloody and brutal affair. And then right after, Chris Benoit would win the Royal Rumble match all the way from number 1 to earn a championship match at WrestleMania 20 2 months later. So, like I said in my Royal Rumble review, at the time, rules stipulated that the Royal Rumble winner would have the ability to challenge for their brand, and then their brand only, their championship. So Benoit was a SmackDown superstar, so that meant he had to challenge for the WWE Championship, which meant that he would have to challenge Brock Lesnar. But as I also noted in my retro review for that show, Benoit, the next night on Raw, he had exploited a loophole that allowed him to go to Raw the night after and challenge Triple H instead for the World Heavyweight Championship. So, like I said, that became the new norm for the Royal Rumble, with choosing who you want to choose. Choose your own adventure going into WrestleMania. However, 1 week later, before there was Cody Rhodes wanting to finish his story, HBK wanted to finish his story with Triple H at WrestleMania, but he didn't have a valid reason to. Just like with a couple other wrestlers that that lose all these big matches, and even though they should have a valid reason and have the better story of having a better title match with an actual better story rather than the big money matches at WrestleMania 40. sorry. Not to get in the whole side rant with a certain Women's World Championship match. Sorry. HBK wanted to finish his story with Triple H at WrestleMania, but he didn't have a valid reason to. So he took matters into his own hands, interrupted the contract signing between Benoit and Triple H, and decided to give Benoit Sweet Chin Music, his super kick finisher, and signed the contract that Benoit was supposed to sign on his dotted line. So then the next week on Raw, Eric Bischoff decides to make a match between HBK and Benoit, and the winner would get Triple H at WrestleMania, or seemingly so, at least. Shawn Michaels would win that match, and Triple H decided to congratulate him, like, hey, good job. I'm going to pedigree your ass. And Triple H, unfortunately, was informed by the sheriff, Stone Cold Steve Austin, that Triple H would indeed defend his title at WrestleMania, but it would be against Shawn Michaels and Chris Benoit in a triple threat match for the World Heavyweight Championship. So that sets up your main event for WrestleMania 20. On the 20th anniversary, you're getting the ultimate climax for the World Heavyweight Championship. So here we were, WrestleMania 20 for the World Heavyweight Championship, a triple threat match. And you started off with both Chris Benoit and HBK fighting over who got to punch Triple H first in the face. And this was pretty much a fast-paced a flurry of a match, because both men, all three men, they hated each other. They really hated each other. Not in real life, but like on screen, of course. And then, like moments later in the match, you have HBK hitting an early moonsault from the top turnbuckle to the outside onto the game, and Benoit for a near fall on Triple H. And then much later in the match, you have Michaels trying to go for Benoit's German suplex trifecta. Benoit countered after the first one. He did the trifecta himself, and then he hit his signature diving headbutt on Michaels for a near fall. And then HBK actually nearly won the match, like barely, with Sweet Chin Music on Triple H after he successfully pulled in his rally. But at the last moment, Benoit pulled out the champion at the very last minute. So heads up play by Benoit. And then you would have blood. You have blood shed all over the ring and all over Michael's face when Benoit catapulted HBK into the top turnbuckle. And you clearly knew it was like blading. You use a blade and then you shove it all over yourself. But then Triple H saved HBK from tapping out to the Crippler crossface, which was Benoit's submission finisher. And then they were like, okay, enough of this crap. We're going to take out our biggest threat, which was Chris Benoit. They decided, after Chris Benoit was trying to put Triple H through a table, HBK got back into the swing of things and decided to form a temporary alliance. They suplex tossed Benoit through the SmackDown announce table. And then HBK was like, okay, now it's time to get down to real business. It's time for us to finish our story. Get your ass in here, Triple H. And they fought into it for a couple minutes. HBK made Triple H bleed as well, threw him into the ring post on the outside. But the champion, Triple H, hit a pedigree back into the ring, and he almost recreated the ending from the previous year's WrestleMania with Booker T, taking his long, sweet-ass time to go and cover HBK. But then this time around, you have Benoit suddenly come back and break up the pin. Then you have, in the final moments of the match, Benoit locking in the sharpshooter on Triple H, only to receive Sweet Chin Music from HBK for another near fall. And then when he tried to go for it again, Benoit reversed it and threw HBK out of the ring, and he was almost on the receiving end of a pedigree. But nope, the Rabid Wolverine reverses it into the crossface again. And Triple H tries to fight out of it, tries to get to the ropes for a rope break, but after a long struggle to try and break it through different means, Triple H had no choice. He had no choice but to put his hands down, tap out, and we had a new World Heavyweight Champion by the name of Redacted. Sorry, Chris Benoit. So, I know I made a lot of jokes about the man that can't be named in these 3 retro reviews that I've done this year. But, man, I gotta say, this triple threat, each time that I watched it, like through, social media, and I guess back in the day, like when I had the WWE Network, but watching this again for this review, it's actually really fun, to rewatch, because there's always something happening, and there's actually, a couple senses of unpredictability. Was Triple H actually going to retain the title, or was HBK finally going to reclaim the World Heavyweight title that he really shouldn't have lost in 2002, in that short period of time? So there's an actual sense of unpredictability in this match. Like, you kind of didn't know who was going to win this match. Sure, Benoit won the Royal Rumble, but like some people thought, like, was he really going to win this match at WrestleMania? There's like a sense of doubt. I'm not like, at least like from my perspective, like maybe there was a little sense of doubt, but I don't know back in 2004. But in the end, though, WWE stuck with the ending that they had during that time period and went with the Rabid Wolverine as your World Heavyweight Champion. Now, some people will say that triple threat matches devalue one-on-one title matches, especially with these big name matches, Triple H and Shawn Michaels, being 2 big names in the wrestling industry. I mean, and you throw in someone like Chris Benoit, it's like, oh, why is he in there? It's like, it kind of devalues the match. And we'll look at some of these other triple threat matches that happened, not just back then, but then you look at the future ones going forward, like with, Brock Lesnar and John Cena. And then you add in Seth Rollins at the Royal Rumble. And then, I guess for WrestleMania's sake, Daniel Bryan, Randy Orton, and Batista. And I know some people shit on that, but I mean, for the story that they're telling, it wasn't the original plan at all. It makes a lot of sense. It makes some sense. So anyway, in some instances like this, it can make them really fun. It can make them unpredictable. And while, yes, WWE can't reference this anymore because of what Benoit did 3 years later, I'm not going to talk about the exact specifics again. It still is one of the better main events of the 40-year history of WrestleMania because of just how fun, how action-packed and paced it was. It's just unfortunate that WWE can't talk about it anymore because, well, Benoit is a you-know-what. But in terms of Benoit, it was also a very nice reward to a wrestler that, has been fighting for over 15 years, showcasing his not just his wrestling ability, and they gave him a very nice moment with his best friend to end the night in all that confetti. Unfortunately, though, a lot afterwards didn't really translate to success for either champion in terms of, getting in ratings, getting in like viewership and all that, which is unfortunate. So because neither Eddie Guerrero nor Chris Benoit, they were not the proven draws as champion on the respective brands, and they didn't exactly have good feuds post WrestleMania. Benoit, yeah, he had a rematch with Triple H and HBK at Backlash, but then he went on to have a feud with Kane at Bad Blood, and then turned his attention to Randy Orton, who he lost the title to. And then you had Eddie feuding with JBL for much of the summer. Not a lot happened in that feud. And he eventually lost the title to him at the Great American Bash before moving on to Kurt Angle. So, yeah, it was pretty much, the follow-up was not great for either champion. But, I mean, for the moments, for the lead up to it, it was actually pretty good. Yeah, obviously, what you do after is also just as important. And I think that's something that WWE really still forgets. Like, you have to also plan for the long term. You also have to plan you still have to plan out what's supposed to happen afterwards, which is something that they didn't do with Daniel Bryan 10 years later at WrestleMania 30, although the injury pretty much affected pretty much affected things. And then you also have to wonder, what are you going to do if it comes to fruition? What are you going to do with Cody Rhodes as champion, as the WWE champion, if he actually gets to finish his story at WrestleMania 40? These are some long-term things that this WWE has to figure out, like they kind of didn't do with Benoit and Eddie 20 years prior. So going back to some of the aftermath of this event, Triple H and HBK decided to intensify their one-on-one feud after Backlash, after losing that rematch, and that led to General Manager Eric Bischoff calling for one final blow-off match at a certain pay-per-view that happened in the summer of June. What is that match, you say? Well, who knows? Maybe that's another story for another time. But for now, we close the Old Icebox for this retro review on its 20th anniversary of, WrestleMania 20. For a show like this, celebrating its 20th anniversary, I think it was okay. I thought it was very decent, if not solid at best. But by no means was it great. I mean, for an anniversary show, it really dragged. There was a lot of filler on the show. I think that was the problem from making this a good show. It's because for a main event title match like the world title, the world heavyweight title, the WWE title, and then you have the opening match that started off pretty well for itself and established it was a stepping stone for John Cena. And then obviously you had the return of The Undertaker that started to wake everybody up again. And then you had a kind of solid match with Chris Jericho and Christian, and the handicap match too. That's like, half of your card? The rest of it was filler. It was like, there's a lot of nothing matches on this card that really shouldn't have been on this show. It was basically, what WWE was doing 10 years later with all these unnecessarily stacked WrestleManias, where it was like quantity over quality. That's why I still say that WrestleMania 31 was the last balanced and good WrestleMania, like one night WrestleMania where there weren't too many matches, but there was a lot of quality on that show. Because when you could tell after the controversial Lesnar versus Goldberg match, people were really getting drained during this show. So overall, would I recommend a rewatch of this event for the casual fan, for the filthy casuals out there, whether you're into wrestling or not? 20 years later, for some matches, sure. I say the most recommended one I would say would be, I would say from a mainstream casual perspective, I say The Undertaker versus Kane, or for like if you're trying to watch something, just out of random, I'd say the World Heavyweight Championship match, per se, or maybe even John Cena versus The Big Show. But there's a good amount of skippable matches in this WrestleMania. I will say though, the pre-Mania build-up for this show during this period, miles better than what WWE is doing right now with, like I said, WrestleMania 40. Like seriously, where's the build-up? How many cars? Let me look. How many matches do we have for the show for WrestleMania 40 in Philadelphia? We have 4 or 5 now, and I know there's probably a good amount more, but it's like they didn't even announce any yet. If I'm looking at it right now, they haven't even officially announced these matches yet. Like, for example, we've been teased Jimmy versus Jey Uso and they haven't even built that up yet, and we're like, what, 3 weeks away from the event, and what's supposed to be a kind of highly anticipated feud, they're not even building it. Triple Big Nose is not even building to that shit. It's like, a show centered around the bloodline again. It's like a key match. One of the key matches is not even being built up in this brotherly feud that these two brothers want so bad, and yet they're not doing it. They're not even trying to build anything upon it. Like, what are we doing? What is Triple Big Nose doing? And then, for all the other non-bloodline marquee matches that they're trying to build, it's like, it's just so subpar, or like non-existent at all. It's like, I tried to warn you all with Damage Control, that Damage Control story. It's like, they're speed running that shit. They're speed running everything. It's like they're trying to any percent that shit. Like, oh, let's dupe Bailey's face turn on, like, right after the Royal Rumble. Let's dupe Dakota Kai's turn on Bailey, like, without any proper build towards it. And then same thing with Rhea versus Becky. I warned you all about this. It's like, I'm actually not sure if I warned you anyone about this, but the point stands that, the focus is on someone else, like literally 3 weeks out to WrestleMania, and you're just going to rely on this match because of name value. Of course. They typically do that. Of course, Triple Big Nose and the higher-ups decide to focus on that instead of an actual story that exists. Dumbasses. And, but that other match, Rhea versus, that certain person, is worthy of a back. They'll save that for later at Backlash in France or SummerSlam in Cleveland. The skid marks. Yeah, the home of the skid marks. Yeah, that the Deshaun Watson guy. For all those people that say, "Oh, Deshaun Watson's a, he's worse than Vince McMahon." No. You know what that match is equivalent of? The Pro Bowl. That person that's gonna supposedly take that title off of Rhea, and she does it there. That's the equivalent of the Pro Bowl. That's the Pro Bowl. It's a regular season win. I mean, not to sound ungrateful or anything, but I get they're trying to build this thing a little bit further, and I'm trying to be patient with it, but they're already fucking it up. They're kind of already fucking it up. I'm kind of losing interest. I'm trying not to, but I'm not trying not to get into it either, but it's just like, they're fucking it up. And this is the problem with this Mania build. This is why 20 years ago, Mania builds meant something. Mania builds 20 years later don't mean shit. Other than, I guess, for as convoluted as it is, the Bloodline going up against Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins. It's like, how is that more interesting than everything else that's happening on this show? I guess, because The Rock decided to overstep his authority and as a member of the board and try to get his one-on-one match when, nope, that wasn't going to happen for me, brother. It's just frustrating. It's just absolutely frustrating where they're trying to build this show with WrestleMania 40 compared to last year. Not last year. Well, actually, yeah, last year with WrestleMania 39. Yes, the build wasn't quite always there, but at least you had something. You had multiple stories already in place. And even 20 years ago with WrestleMania 20, multiple stories already in place. But no, here we are 20 years later, like 3 weeks out with WrestleMania 40 in a wrestling city in Philadelphia, where you're going to hear the most critical and the most hardcore and the most smarkiest of fans. They're going to rat your ass out. Or they're going to be too blinded to see of how crappy this really is. Maybe I'm being too negative, but again, I'm not going to try to go on. I'm trying not to go on a hardcore tangent on this. But yeah, how is it that 20 years later with WrestleMania 40, the build is terrible? The build is shit compared to WrestleMania 20, where you had multiple stories in place. Lesnar versus Goldberg for, how the build ended up being shitty. The triple threat world title match. The WWE title match. What else is there? Jericho versus Christian. JR versus Christian was months in the make. Was a months long story, and then Undertaker versus Kane, and then Cena versus Big Show, and then like half these matches that I liked had build. Makes no sense, and it just speaks to laziness. It just speaks to absolute laziness. So anyway, yeah, sorry about getting into that tangent, but I need to say that. I really need to say that because 20 years later, WWE has gotten lazy with the booking. Can't plan this shit out months in advance, other than the Bloodline. Come up with something better. So anyway, sorry for that tangent. Let me know your thoughts on WrestleMania 20 as we now finally close the old Icebox after all that in the comments on YouTube. And give me your thoughts on social media, on X and Instagram. And yeah, send me a message on what your match, if you ever watched this pay-per-view, what's your favorite moment from WrestleMania 20 years ago on its 20th anniversary. And yeah, let's start a conversation about this pay-per-view where it all began again. But anyway, that is it for this episode of Very Cold Lasagna. I am your filthy casual host, DylanLasagna. Thank you for tuning into episode number 190 of this icy yet spicy sports podcast. And like I said, we'll be back with our 2023 NFL season recaps in the next episode for part 3. We have a lot of catching up to do in that episode, and probably be as long as this episode right here. But anyway, until then, eat that lasagna, very cold, in the fridge with your takes on the world of sports. And until the next one, peace out.